My team and I, Thrive, have decided to focus on the saddening issue of teen suicide. According to the Utah Department of Health, we have observed a 141.3 increase of suicides among Utah youth aged 10 to 17 from 2011 to 2015, compared to an increase nationally of 23.5. These numbers are very concerning. This may lead you to ask the question, what can I do about teen suicide? An article written and published by the Deseret News by Ben Lockhart raises the concern that firearms are used in roughly 50% of all suicide deaths in Utah, and there is a fatality rate of 87% when a firearm is used. A bill called HB 87 may help reduce these numbers. Sponsored by Representative Elizabeth Waite, that failed to pass the Utah legislature in 2019 will be coming up for vote again in 2020. HB 87 would make it possible to charge people with a crime that do not safely and properly store their firearms. I feel that it is imperative we contact our elected senators and voice our opinion for this bill and how important it is that it passes.
To talk about, but it's important to ignore. Suicide is the second largest cause of death of young people between ages of 15 and 24. So we have to pay attention to those little details so they don't suicide.
Just as Diana stated, we want to be aware of warning signs that may be shown prior to somebody trying to commit suicide. Suicide.org states that some suicide warning signs are appearing depressed or sad most of the time, talking or writing about death or suicide, withdrawing from family or friends, feeling hopeless, feeling helpless, feeling strong anger or rage, feeling strapped like there is no way out of a situation, experiencing dramatic mood changing, abusing drugs or alcohol, exhibiting a change of personality, acting impulsively, losing interest in most activities, experiencing a change in sleep habits, experience a change in eating habits, so weight loss or weight gain, losing interest in most activities, performing poorly at work or school, giving away prized possessions, writing a will, feeling excessive guilt or shame, or acting recklessly.
The U.S. average suicide rate was 14.5 in 2019, according to the United Health Foundation. That may not seem like a lot, and that's because, relatively speaking, it isn't. But that isn't the full picture of suicide. For example, for every fatal suicide attempt, there's nearly 25 non-fatal attempts, which brings the number up to almost 2% of the population. But that isn't all. Nearly 10% of young people have reported having serious suicidal ideations. To simplify those numbers a little bit, that means 1 in 10 youth between the ages of 15 and 25 have contemplated suicide, and 1 in 50 have attempted it. And that's all within a pool of nearly 45 million people. But the majority of those are comprised of only one gender. According to the World Health Organization, men in the U.S. are nearly 3.5 times more likely to die from suicide than women. That's a strange number, though, because women tend to be more susceptible to men to get depression, and even attempt suicide slightly more often, about 1.2 times more often. So why do men comprise the deaths of suicide at a nearly 3-to-1 rate? There's a few reasons for that. Men are generally more violent and intent on committing suicide. It doesn't need to be a lot. If you could plot the aggression of men versus women on a spectrum, it would come out as somewhat like a bell curve. And the thing about that is that all the action is happening at the extreme ends of the bell curves, which means a slight deviation in the average result in a large deviation at the ends. And on top of that, because of that, men are generally more susceptible to using more violent and more lethal tactics of suicide than women do, such as guns, which is why Bill talked about the proposal to criminalize unsecured gun storage. Another thing is men are less likely to seek help from medical professionals. The UKB Medical Journal did a study that showed men are 32% less likely to consult primary care of any sort than a woman is. And it isn't that men have less of the same issues as well, by the way. It just shows that men are less aware that what they're experiencing is signs of mental illnesses, generally depression. This could be due to a number of factors, such as the apprehension of men to be emotionally vulnerable due to cultural influences. Another thing is men are nearly twice as likely to self-medicate. With drugs, alcohol, whatever, which in most cases leads to worsened depression. All of these are things I never learned or heard about in high school, and I'm only a few years out of it, which is why we as a group think there needs to be better education to everyone in the circle around the youth about suicide, especially the facts like that. To know all of that shows that you truly aren't alone in this. If you knew that 1 in 10 of your peers has seriously contemplated suicide, you would definitely not feel alone. We also believe that as far as education goes, the youth should know when to see those signs in their peers, and to know that they should be okay with getting their friends who are showing those signs help that they need. Same thing with teachers. Teachers should be trained to look for those signs in students who are at a higher risk, and get them to the school counselor is the end goal. We believe then that the counselor should have more training, especially as to know when the student truly is at a higher risk and should be sent to a medical professional. And at that point also get the parents involved. And
here's Sammy. She will explain to us that there's many opportunities to train people in recognizing these early warning signs and getting these teens the help that they may need.
With the rate of suicide in Utah being so high, there's a huge need for individuals and companies that work with young people on a regular basis to have proper training on how to see the early warning signs, to how to approach a young person in crisis, and asking questions such as a direct question versus an indirect question. So an indirect question would be, you're not going to do something stupid, right? Versus, I know when people are really struggling and overwhelmed with things, they think of suicide. Is that something that you're thinking about? Luckily, Hope for Utah has made a training called Question, Persuade, Refer, or QPR. This is for people who are strategically placed around young people to be able to refer an individual who is in crisis to someone who can help. These people are also called gatekeepers. Gatekeepers are people who are strategically placed around young people, such as parents, friends, teachers, to caseworkers and police officers. Anyone who is in a place to recognize and refer someone at risk of suicide. When I was in high school, suicide really wasn't talked about, and feeling depressed wasn't really a thing. And I mean, that's only I think 8 or 9 years ago when I was in high school. And when I was feeling like that, I didn't have anyone at school to go to talk to about it, because it was a private Christian school and they said, oh no, God will help you. Or why don't we pray about this? Because everything is always better later. And that really isn't the way to go about it, because when someone is in crisis, they don't really think about anyone else besides what they're feeling inside. When I was feeling that way, I had to tell my doctor, and they referred me to a therapist. So there is a need for people who would have worked around me to refer me straight to a therapist rather than having for me to go and tell my doctor, because there's a lot of people who won't talk about it and who won't have the courage to bring it up around people because they don't want to be a burden. This is why I feel that QPR should be an annual training for anyone that works directly with young people, as well as it should be a class that is offered to parents and guardians that have young people in the house, because a lot of the times the behaviors and the early warning signs show up first in the household. So I feel that we need to have proper training for individuals and companies, as well as offering it to teenagers and parents and guardians who are around teenagers, because anyone can be a person that helps stop suicide. And this would, I feel, drastically take the rate of suicide down in Utah. Thank you.
There are specific clues or behaviors that someone may portray if they're struggling with suicidal ideation, and it is important for everybody. Like, there's not one person excluded. Like, it is important for everybody to be able to recognize those. And if we had more people recognizing the signs that people were putting off, but they may be very vague signs, but they're still there, and we could have, it will prevent so many suicides, like so many suicide attempts, if people everywhere are aware of those and are aware of the importance of knowing those. Because after somebody does commit suicide, there is guilt upon the family, upon the friends. Like, what could I have done? Like, what did I not see? Like, what was I missing? And who knows, like, if they would have been trained or would have known or would have been educated on the signs and the clues that you need to watch for in a person, then it could have been stopped. So that is why it is so important. People will show verbal clues, they will show behavioral clues, and they'll show situational clues. So in verbal clues, there's indirect and direct. So if somebody were to give a direct clue, they would say, I'm going to kill myself, or very, very direct, right to the point. A person who is maybe doing it more in an indirect way is going to kind of not straight up say it, but they're still going to say, hey, I'm tired of life, I can't do this anymore, but aren't going to say something so direct, if that makes sense. And someone who also, if someone is having suicidal ideation, they may show behavioral signs. So things such as they may have unexplained anger, reoccurring or new depression. They may just not be interested in things they used to be interested in, or they may start, like, drug and alcohol abuse is also linked to suicidal ideation also. So somebody who hasn't been involved in drugs and alcohol before and all of a sudden are, like, that's also can be a sign. Situational is one that can affect someone like crazy. So if somebody has a life-altering event happen in their lives, that can seriously put someone at way higher risk for suicide. So things such as if they did have a family member especially by suicide, that causes a higher risk person, right? So also just things like they got fired from a job, they don't have a friend that they once had, they just had a bad breakup. Like, those do, as much as they seem like they're not that important, like they put someone at much higher risk. So it is important that if we know someone who's going through something like that, we take a step, like we go to them. We can't expect people who are struggling to always reach out, because it's hard. It's such a difficult thing. And speaking from personal experience with a person who did commit suicide in my life not too long ago, she did show some of these signs, and it's so sad because I know it now. And did I know it then? No. And I wasn't completely close to her, but even I could see signs of alcohol and drug abuse, and she didn't spend time with her kids. She, things like that. She did have a mom die. Like, it's just those things we have to watch out for as individuals and to better our community and watch for those signs. And we can prevent so many attempts and so many suicides if we just pay attention to their signs and their clues, and we approach them and we ask what we can do. We ask how they're doing. We have to try our best to reach out to them and not always expect them to reach out to us.